Thus, Vedanta carried a message of hope and security, a message that outraged neither religion nor philosophy nor science. Evidently, when the people of the New World, America, and also of Europe listened to this universal message from the life of the Hindu monk, they must have realized that it embraced all that was best in the culture of the West. Vedanta was the heaven that leavened the thought world in the West, and when the mantle of Vivekananda fell on Abhedananda, the leavening process continued to ascend its influence as the subsequent history reflects. When the Vedanta movement came into being following his triumphant success at the Parliament and as it began to gain ground, Swami Vivekananda, as the originator and leader of the movement, was conscious of the need of its influence on individuals. This question of the individual takes an important place in both his and his immediate successor, Abhedananda's, life work. And those who have watched closely the work of the Swamis in America and elsewhere can testify to the fact many lives have been changed through the self-sacrificing efforts of the Swamis. And this was the crowning success of Swami Vivekananda as a religious teacher and spiritual leader. The most tangible result of the Vedanta movement was as though the soul of America, which had long asked for spiritual sustenance, had been answered. Their whole existence had become saturated with living spirituality that Vivekananda embodied. In the long history of human civilization, we have seldom come across with such a religious movement as the one we are discussing here. Indeed, the Vedanta movement in the West, which originated through Swami Vivekananda, is characterized as something unique insofar as its spiritual appeal is concerned. Hitherto, many learned scholars have attempted to make some assessment of the significance of this movement, but none of them have viewed it in its proper perspective. Was it purely a religious movement in the accepted sense of the term? Certainly not. It was something else, which the rising generation of the 20th century needed most. Europe and America have made out today that the ultimate and essential teachings of Vedanta are in complete accordance with the most advanced scientific thought of modern times. Western science, poetry, and philosophy are all printed today to what is in many respects very much like the Vedantic solution of the problem of man and the universe as the one solution which is consistent with the truth of things. India, where the light of Vedantic wisdom was first lit, was destined to become the guiding light of all mankind. So thought Ram Mohan as early as the 20s of the 19th century, and by a historical process it took more than half a century to realize the truth of it. The genius which realized it was Swami Vivekananda. Of course, there were others who went abroad before him, but none of them ever thought of placing before the world our ancient Vedantic ideal of life, an ideal so true and so full of promise to humanity, clothed in language suited to the understanding of modern man. Vivekananda and his successors in the West had the talent to adopt the critical, comparative, and historical methods of looking at things and preaching the sublime thoughts of Vedanta in the West. And it will not be out of place to mention here a fact that being a direct and ardent follower of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, the new prophet of mankind, that Swami Vivekananda and Swami Abhedananda did not preach at first even the Master's sublime life and teachings before the Western people. Because he, Abhedananda, knew that the Western country was not prepared enough at first to grasp or appreciate the loftiest ideals of the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. And so he preached at first, before the Western country, the sublime thoughts and ideals of Vedanta, which knows no ideas of sectarianism and bigotry, rather which absolutely maintains a unifying outlook and universal love for all, irrespective of caste, creed, and color. And it was for this reason that Swami Vivekananda delivered the lectures on the life and teachings of his master, Sri Ramakrishna, both in England and America, only later. In this connection, we are reminded of a classic utterance of Swami Abhedananda, to whose constructive genius and untiring labor of the movement owed its success. He said that in a course of one of his public lectures in America in 1897, "Truth is like a torch. The more we shake it, the more it shines. The sublime rationality of Vedanta can allow the roughest handling of it without the slightest injury to itself. The fiercest light of day may be made to beat upon Vedanta, and there will not be found a single ugly feature or dark spot exposed to view." And when to some of his Western critics, Swami Vivekananda repeatedly asserted, "You say that it is a secret and hidden religion." In submitting to this change, I would like to point out that the Vedanta movement is secret and hidden only in the sense that it is other than the plain and patent forms of ritualistic religion and worship, in the sense that it is wholly based upon self-restraint and self-culture, upon each individual realizing his God within himself. Not only the kingdom of God, but also God himself is within you. This is the grandest mystery of all mysteries, and the only one that the religion of Vedanta ever consciously proclaims. This was, in short, the attitude of the whole Vedanta movement in the West. And this is why it could so easily gain ground there, unless there were historical forces behind the self-imposed task of Vivekananda and his successors, and it is very much doubtful whether their efforts would have met with success. Were they, that is, Vivekananda and Abhedananda, preachers by accident? No, they were not. If one reads carefully Vivekananda's article in the Hindu Preacher, it will be abundantly clear to any reader that at least so far, that is, Abhedananda's article, was concerned, the course of his thinking was towards one direction, to preach Hinduism and Vedanta abroad, and he was conscious about the new changes in the world order. And he too, like Swami Vivekananda, was perfectly aware of the new methods of preaching when he went out with that mission at the call of his leader. It was a Herculean task on the part of both Swami Vivekananda and Swami Abhedananda to make the movement a success. It took a long time for the seed sown by them to bear fruit. How a Westerner viewed Swami Vivekananda's work in America could be best understood from a letter to the editor of the Brahmaveda, and we reproduce below the extract from the letter, which is dated from New York, 12th January 1896, and it was published in the Brahmaveda in Madras. The wonderful success which the Swami Vivekananda achieved in spreading the religious and philosophical ideas of the Hindus in our country may lead one to the erroneous conclusion that this happy result is due to a coincidence of favorable circumstances, rather than to the extraordinary ability of the agent chosen by destiny to carry out this difficult task. It is only by studying the condition of our country, by taking cognizance of the antagonistic forces that had to be coped with, and considering the numerous difficulties to be overcome in this attempt, that we came to fully appreciate the grandeur of the work accomplished, and to realize that the great success accompanying it is solely due to the personality of Vivekananda, to his extraordinary moral, intellectual, and spiritual endowments, and to his exceptional energy and willpower. And to no other, all his theology would be crushed under the weight of Western civilization, Western philosophy, and Western science. So sure, were they of their triumph that they invited him in New York to lecture before their society, anxious to show to their numerous followers how easily religious claims can be refuted by the powerful arguments of their logic and pure reasoning. I shall never forget that memorable evening when the Swami, accepting the challenge, appeared single-handed to face the matadors of materialism, all arrayed with their heaviest armor of law and reason and logic, and all the stock phrases calculated to awe and terrify the ignorant mass. Imagine their surprise and consternation when they found that, far from being intimidated by these big words, he proved himself a master in wielding their own weapons, and as familiar with the arguments of materialism as with those of Advaita philosophy. And he showed them that their much vaunted Western civilization consisted principally in the development of the one to destroy their fellow men, that their Western science could not answer the most vital question of life and being, that the very idea of matter was a metaphysical conception, and that it was the much despised metaphysics upon which ultimately rested the very basis of their materialism. The powerful effect of this lecture could be seen on the following day, when numbers of the materialistic camp came to sit at the feet of the Hindu monk and listen to his sublime utterances on God and religion. Thus, Vivekananda had first to clear the ground and lay a deep foundation for the grand edifice to be built. The same correspondence gave it his subsequent dispatches from New York the accounts of the rapid progress of Vivekananda's work, and there, from these accounts, one can have a clear idea of how the Vedanta movement in the West started and how it gathered momentum when Vivekananda left the entire movement to the charge of his able lieutenant, Swami Abhedananda. We shall have occasion to refer to this movement again as we relate the story of Abhedananda's life as the preacher of the Vedantic gospel to the New World, which began towards the end of 1897. The Vedanta movement in the West has been characterized by Wendell Thomas, the author of the book Hinduism Invades America, as Ramakrishna Movement in America. And it is truly so. For in the larger context of history, it can be very appropriately said that the sadhana, or spiritual practice that began at Dakshineswar at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and within Ramakrishna himself, and the phenomenal experiment and synthesis ultimately found their logical fulfillment in the movement which was initiated by Swami Vivekananda and consolidated by Swami Abhedananda, who were the most beloved disciples of the Master, and who were particularly trained and taught and commissioned by him to become the spiritual messengers of India to the West. They were not merely visionaries, neither they were so-called religious missionaries. They were, on the contrary, the chosen tools of destiny.